Grandpa hadn't seen a single tractor in his field until one crisp morning in 1978. Then two rolled in, and suddenly the rhythm of planting changed forever. The air buzzed with excitement and fear. Excitement for the promise of more grain, fear of the unknown. Grandma clutched her apron, eyes wide, as neighbors whispered about reform that sounded more like magic than policy. What was this household responsibility system everyone kept talking about? And how would it shake the very roots of village life? To understand the whirlwind that swept through China's countryside, we need to go back to the fall of 1976, when Mao passed away and the old order trembled. Reformers saw opportunity in chaos, and rural families, who made up 80% of the population, were about to become the experiment's beating heart. But the real question was, could a nation born in revolution learn to embrace change without losing its soul? And if so, what would become of the humble lives of Grandpa and Grandma? Overnight, the commune's iron grip loosened. Land once farmed by huge teams was divided among families. Suddenly, Grandma and Grandpa weren't just a cog in the collective, they were entrepreneurs of the earth. Grain quotas still hung over their heads, but any extra harvest belonged to them. They could sell, trade, or even buy a new pair of sturdy shoes. They planted rice in muddy paddies by sunrise and counted coins by sunset. For the first time in decades, their efforts translated directly into better meals, warmer quilts, and a glimmer of hope. But with autonomy came risk. A drought or disease didn't just delay dinner, it threatened the family's very survival. Why risk it all? Because the promise of a full granary proved too tempting to resist. And just when they thought they had this new system figured out, something far bigger was brewing in the nearby marketplace. As fields flourished, village councils began to sow seeds of a different kind. Small factories called township and village enterprises, or TVEs. What started as a workshop fixing bicycles blossomed into plants making brick molds, noodles, and even simple electronics. Grandpa switched between plowing and stacking crates, while Grandma used her extra earnings to send their grandson to school. TVEs offered wages that outshone any rice harvest. Men who once wrestled oxen now operated looms. Women who knew only weeding learned to wrap noodles for city markets. By 1985, millions in rural areas worked in these enterprises, flooding China's growing towns with products stamped "Made in the Village." But with success came a new danger: competition and debt. Some TVEs gambled on loans and found themselves tangled in red ink. How did villages survive these financial storms? That tale takes us to the heart of rural resilience. In the early 1980s, credit cooperatives sprouted like mushrooms after rain. Suddenly, Grandma could borrow enough to buy a spinning wheel. Grandpa could lease a small tractor. Cash flowed into the village, fueling dreams of expansion. Yet not all loans bore fruit. A failed harvest or a machine breakdown could turn opportunity into disaster overnight. Families who couldn't repay risked losing their land lease, and with it, their only source of income. Shadows of fear crept in as some villagers quietly called these cooperatives the loan sharks of reform. In one nearby town, a sudden maize blight left dozens unable to pay back credit. Neighbors banded together, pooling rice and funds to help them avoid ruin. This spirit of mutual aid became the safety net that kept rural life from unraveling. But even as communities rallied, a different exodus was underway, one that would leave fields quieter than ever. By the late 1980s, factories and cities hummed day and night, calling to young villagers with promises of higher pay and new adventures. Sons and daughters packed their bags and waved farewell, clutching train tickets and dreams. Left behind were grandparents, toddlers, and fields that needed tending. Grandma learned to care for her 2-year-old grandson and Grandpa's failing back at the same time. She woke before dawn, cooked porridge, and laid out rice cakes for the little one, while also tending fields that once burst with neighbors at her side. Remittances from urban workers flowed home like a lifeline, paying for medicine and school books. Yet the village's heart beat to a different tune now, one of longing and letters mailed weeks apart. What happens when the keepers of tradition grow too few to pass down their stories? Stay tuned, because our next chapter dives into the very soul of this changing world. Even as tractors hummed and factories whirred, Grandpa still gathered willow branches to weave baskets, a craft passed down through generations. Each basket carried memories, festival offerings, market goods, even the occasional lunch for a traveling monk. Village elders formed study groups under old oak trees, teaching calligraphy and folk songs to the handful of kids who remained. During the Mid-Autumn Festival, villagers lit lanterns carved with ancient poems, reciting lines Grandma had whispered in her childhood. This revival of culture became their refuge, a way to anchor identity amid the storm of progress. Yet as younger generations grew up in cities, would they return to learn these old songs? Or would these melodies fade like footprints in newly paved roads? We'll explore that next. By the dawn of the 1990s, even the remotest villages caught their first glimpse of a different kind of harvest: electricity. Streetlights flickered on dusty roads, and television sets glowed in living rooms that once knew only candles. Farmers tuned their new sets to agricultural programs, learning techniques from experts they'd never meet in person. Market prices for grain flashed on screens, helping Grandpa decide whether to sell or store his harvest. Grandma used a borrowed radio to catch weather forecasts, timing planting and harvest to the very day. Mobile phones arrived in the early 2000s, but the seeds of digital change were planted back then. Who could have guessed that the quiet fields of China would one day share their stories with the world? And what happens when every whisper of the village goes global? That's a question we'll answer in our final chapter. From the first leased plot of land to the last flicker of a lantern-lit festival, rural China's journey from 1976 to 1989 reveals a tapestry woven with hope, hardship, and heart. Grandpa and Grandma stand at its center, guiding us through fields that taught them resilience and communities that taught them compassion. Their stories remind us that progress need not erase the past, it can honor it. As China's countryside hums with the promise of tomorrow, electric lights, online markets, and beyond, the whispers of the village carry lessons that reach far beyond any field. In the end, it's not tractors or TVs that define a people. It's the hands that plant, the voices that sing, and the hearts that never stop believing in the next harvest.